Happy Thursday. I hope that you guys are having a good day. Instagram has been having a bad day, though. Bless their hearts. I hope that they have everything figured out now because it's been a rough day. They're like, the first thing when I woke up this morning, Instagram was like not updating, lots of errors. And I wasn't even sure that we were going to be able to do our live tonight because it still has a lot of errors, but hopefully everything goes well. So, hi, hello from Morocco. Wow. I hope that it's not too late or too early there. I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, so hello from Boston. Thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. I'm so excited. We're going to talk about, is it chapter 7? Chapter 6 or chapter 7? Chapter 6. Functions is what we're going to talk about. Chapter 6 of my book, The INFJ User Guide. Hello from Pennsylvania. Hey, Jennifer. Hello. It's late in Morocco. Well, thanks for joining us. Anyway, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you guys, just in case you haven't signed up yet, hello from Ireland. Miss Jill Green, thank you so much for joining us. Hello. Tonight after this live, it's 7 o'clock Eastern time, so an hour from now, which is 8 o'clock Eastern time, I'm going to be doing a free workshop that's called I'm an INFJ, What Now? So if you haven't signed up for it, make sure that you do. There's about probably 12 different links in my bio for it. And you can also find a link at infjwoman.com, which is my website. All you have to do is put in your email address and I'll send you the information so you can join the Zoom call. We're going to talk about what do you do after you found out that you're an INFJ? Like, what's the next step? And the thing is that we're all looking for something, right? There's a reason that you started looking for your personality type. Whether there's something big going on in your life, there's some kind of change that you want to make. Maybe you're just a lot like me. I was completely miserable. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety disorder. I figured out I had an eating disorder. And I was working at my dream job and I was like, why am I so miserable? And then I started looking for answers and I found my personality type. And after that, I was like, okay, so what do I do with all this information? Like, how do I put it to work? And then what's the next step after that? How do you get to be a healthy INFJ? Okay, hello from Rio. Hi. Thank you for joining us. All right, we will get started. We're going to talk about functions. Now, if you've looked at the comments in my, in a lot of my posts, especially the ones that talk about how you determine if you're an INFJ, there are a lot of people who are very focused on functions. So let's talk about functions. So the way that you determine that your personality type is based on preferences. That's how the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Personality Test types people, right? So your preferences are the letters INFJ. That's introvert, intuition, feeling, and judging, right? So those things help you determine what personality type you have, and they tell you a lot about yourself. But they're really only half of the story. And the second half of the story is what we call functions. So we all have 4 different functions. These are primary functions. And then we're going to talk just a little bit about shadow functions. I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed. And the whole shadow functions thing isn't in my book, but it is on my website if you want to read about it. But we all have 4 functions. And the way that you determine what functions you have is you have to determine your preferences first, right? So we have 4 functions. The first one is called the dominant function. That is the defining characteristic of your personality type or the main strength that you have. Your second one is called your auxiliary function. And it is kind of like a sidekick to your dominant function. It's almost just as strong, but not quite as strong. And then the bottom two functions, I think that you say it tertiary. Hopefully that's correct. That one is not very noticeable, and it's usually not developed very well. It really just depends on how much work that you've done. And then the last one is your inferior function, which is the least developed function. So for INFJs, our dominant function is introverted intuition. The auxiliary one is extroverted feeling. So those two are the ones that we use the most and that we're the most in tune with. The bottom two are introverted thinking and extroverted sensing. So those are the ones that we use the least and that we know the least about, right? So let's talk a little bit about what introverted intuition is, because this is the top function, right? This is the one that we use the most. Intuition is your ability to just know things. We take in a lot of information, and a lot of it is like subconscious, so we don't even realize that we're taking in information. Especially when we're around other people, we're taking in a lot of information about them. And we don't, like I said, we don't know where it comes from. It's just something that we do, that's how our brain works, right? And we also process this information very, very quickly. And this is how we just know things. We also, it's really difficult to understand or to explain. It's one of those things where like, you know what you're talking about, but you just really can't put it into words, because it feels like it's kind of like magical or spiritual. Like we're almost some kind of fortune tellers. And there are some INFJs who go that far, but for most of us, we don't really go that far. It's not really magic. It's just kind of how our brain works, right? We gather all this information and then we process it really quickly and we come to conclusions really quickly. And that's how we just know things. So it's kind of funny talking to people about this, because people who have intuition, they get it. And if you tell somebody like, you know, I just had a feeling about that person, or I really don't like that person, you know, maybe you just met them, and when you talk to somebody who has intuition, they're like, oh yeah, I get that. Or I've had that feeling before. I know what you're talking about. People who don't have introverted intuition as their primary function, or who aren't as in tune with their intuition, they don't get it. And they're probably going to tell you to, you know, like, why are you judging those people? And it's not really judging. It's more like knowing. It's different. We notice everything too. We pay attention to a lot of things that other people don't notice. I went to Baltimore with my friends not too long ago, about a month ago now. And we were having this conversation, and I was telling them a story about something that I noticed. It was like a video that I watched or something. And they had watched the same video, and neither one of them picked up on some of the details that I had about it. And they were both looking at me like, you're kind of crazy. And I think one of them even said, how do you know that? And I was like, I don't know. I was just paying attention. Like, you weren't paying attention? And they're like, how many times did you watch the video? And I was like, I don't know, just like the normal amount of times. Like, how can you not see those things? But a lot of people don't pay attention to the same things and to the same level that we pay attention to things. Usually the older that you get, the more in tune with your intuition that you get, and you start to recognize what's going on and you notice the process. You can see a lot of it going on in real time. And when you use your intuition more, when you're paying attention to it and you go with what it says, you go with the feelings, then you get to be more in tune with it, and it works even better. Another thing, this is kind of like combined with our feeling function, or with our feeling preference. When we talk about making big decisions, I like how Evan Carmichael says it. He's an INFJ, like all of us. He says you make big decisions with your heart, and he says, I think he says it backwards. He says small decisions with your head and big decisions with your heart, right? So when I decided, I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for about 6 years, and I sort of got fired from my dream job, and it was also like I was quitting anyway, so it didn't matter. It was like, oh good, now I don't have to quit. But then I had another job that I had for about 5 months, and then I got laid off. And then I was like, okay, so what do I do now? And I kind of just felt like my time in Charlotte was up. Like it was time for me to do something else. And most of the time when I tell people that, they're like, what do you mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense. It was time? Like, you mean you don't have like a logical reason? I'm like, no, it just felt right. And I moved to Boston about a little more than 3 years ago. And really the reason that I picked Boston, I could have moved anywhere in the United States because I didn't have any kids. I didn't have a husband or a boyfriend or anything. And I mean, when I picked Boston, it was just like, I don't know, it just felt right. It seemed like the right thing to do. And everything, as soon as I made that decision, everything just fell into place. And so everything falling into place just kind of confirmed my decision. So a lot of that is intuition, combined with feeling. I just know this is the right thing to do. Okay, so that's our dominant function. Our auxiliary function, which is also, it's right up there with dominant. So it's very strong for us as well. It's extroverted feeling. So this function helps us relate to others. Since the function is extroverted, that means that it's directed outward. That's something I missed on the first function. The first function, the reason that it's called introverted is because it's directed inward. And then extroverted feeling means that it's directed outward, right? So because it's directed outward, then we're more concerned about the thoughts and the feelings of other people, more concerned about other people than we are about ourselves. This makes us like really good peacemakers, really good negotiators, because we can feel the feelings that they have. We notice them more because we're in tune with other people, and we don't have to necessarily put ourselves in their position. We don't have sympathy as much. We have empathy. That's like, it doesn't matter if I've experienced what you're going through, I can still feel it the same as you can feel it. And a lot of times you don't even have to know people. You don't even have to understand what they're going through to be able to feel the emotions radiating off of them. So this makes us really good at settling arguments, peacemakers, negotiators. A lot of that comes from practice too, because we've felt these things from, since forever. And so because we soak up all of those emotions, the negative emotions affect us a lot more. And when there are people around us that have all these negative emotions, then we don't like those emotions. And so the best thing for us is, how can we fix this? Like, I don't want you to be unhappy, and I don't want to be unhappy because you're unhappy. So how can we fix this? What's the best thing that we can do to just make everybody happy again? We're also able to relate to people a lot better than most people, and we can understand people a lot better than most people because we're feeling what they're feeling. They don't have to explain it to us. We just know. This also makes us really good at giving really good advice. And this is one of our greatest strengths and one of our greatest weaknesses too, right? So we're focused on everybody around us. We know what they're going through. We can feel the emotions coming off of them. And we're really good at looking at their situation. We use both the thinking and the feeling side of our personalities, right? So we're really good at facts and logic, and we're really good at all the emotions. So when they're going through something, we can analyze it from the facts and logic and from the emotions and say, okay, this is the best thing that you should do. And then more times than not, we're really good at delivering the information to them diplomatically, but also straightforward. So they understand what we're saying. So that makes it a great strength of ours. But it can also be a really big weakness because our feeling is extroverted. We're really good at paying attention to other people. We're not so great at paying attention to ourselves. So when we need advice, it's really difficult for us to look at our own situation and analyze everything that's going on and say, okay, this is the best thing for me to do. We are the last people that we think about, right? So we're thinking about everybody else in their situation, and we're the last people that we think about. I always tell people a great way to work around this is to think about yourself in the third person, or to even make up a story about somebody else, maybe somebody that you create, like a fictional character, who's in the same situation that you are. Because that way you can distance yourself from what's going on a little bit, and you can analyze it a little bit better. We are our own blind spot. Yes, that's absolutely true. We definitely are. So that is our auxiliary function, which is extroverted feeling. So then we get into the bottom two functions, which a lot of INFJs really, they don't have these functions developed very well, and so they don't really access them very much. It's the more enlightened, the more knowledgeable INFJs, the ones who are really digging into their personality type, the ones who are interested in self-growth and, who want to know more about themselves and who really want to fix their problems. So the third function is called introverted thinking. So again, it's introverted because it's focused inward rather than outward. And this function is where some of our reasoning comes from. It helps us navigate through our intuition and our feelings from a logical perspective. This is where people talk about the NI-T loop, which is the introverted intuition and the introverted thinking loop that you can get into. And it turns into a loop because it's really just like overthinking is really what it is. I don't know why everybody wants to put these fancy words on it, because that's really just what it is. It's overthinking. It's basically your heart is telling you to do one thing and your head is telling you to do another one, and you just get stuck in like this indecision of, I don't know what to do. And you stay in that indecision until you make a decision. The way to get out of that loop, the way to make the pain of indecision stop, is you have to make a decision. And more times than not, it doesn't matter what decision that you make, right? It doesn't matter at all what decision that you make, more times than not. Like for me, when I was trying to decide where I should move in the United States, it didn't matter. There was no right or wrong reason. We really get stuck on this idea of there's a right or wrong reason. I think a lot of it comes from grade school and high school and college, because they give you these tests where there is a right or wrong reason. And so you're taught to say there's a right reason and there's a wrong reason, and I want to make the right decision. And then when you get to be an adult, most of the time there really isn't a right decision or a wrong decision, especially when it's like, where are you going to move to? It's just like, where do you want to move? And that's your heart going, ooh, I want to move. Mine going, I want to move to Boston. I love the East Coast. It would be great to live by the ocean. And then my head going, ooh, Boston is super expensive and you've never been there. And it's a big city and it could be really dangerous. And, I've heard that people are rude and it's really cold and, it's like, and then your heart is going, no, it could be really fun. And your head is going, what in the world are you thinking? So the only way to get out of that is to say, okay, I'm going to make a decision. And however you make decisions, I used to get like a pros and cons list for my niece because she has a perceiving personality, so she can't make a decision to save her life. Bless her heart. But in some of the big decisions, I start to feel like that too. And one of the things that I do is I go ask all of my friends, like, what do you think? If you were in this situation, what would you do? What do you think? And then I like get all of their answers and I analyze all of their answers, and usually their answers come from like, there'll be 5 or 10 different answers, and it's like, ugh, this doesn't help me very much. And then, you're back to square one. So what I learned recently are 2 things. You have to make a decision. And like I said, most of the time it doesn't matter what decision that you make. It didn't matter where I lived in the United States. It really wasn't going to make a difference to me. I just knew that I didn't want to be where I was, right? So you make a decision and then you make it the right decision. So once you make that decision, you say, okay, this is the right decision. No more questioning and no more overthinking. Now we just move into the planning stage. So I've decided I'm moving to Boston. Now what is it going to take to get me to move to Boston? How much money is it going to take? Where am I going to live? Where's the apartment? Once you move into the planning stage, you feel so much peace because we're really, really good at planning, right? We like to be organized. We like to have everything together. And I don't know about you, but I love big adventures. I moved to Charlotte twice by myself, and I grew up in Kansas. So Charlotte was like 1,500 miles away from where all of my family and friends were. And then when I moved to Boston, I moved here on an airplane, so I didn't have a car. And I didn't know how the subway worked, or here they call it the T. I had no idea how that worked. And I remember I got off the plane and I knew that there was supposed to be like a subway train from the airport to downtown. And I knew that like it here, the subway lines are called different colors. So I'm like, okay, I have to get onto the silver line and then transfer to the red line. And then I'm going to the Ashmont station. So I get off the airplane and I'm looking for the silver line, and there are things that say silver line, but it's a bus. And I'm like, I thought it was a train. It's a bus? Is it a bus? It's just a train. It looks like a bus. And so I'm like, okay, this must be the thing because that's what all the signs are. So I get on the bus, and then halfway through the bus ride, it transitions from like a gas-powered bus to an electric-powered type of train. And I'm like, oh, it's a bus and a train. Okay. So I get off there and I'm in the South Station, which is one of the biggest train stations in Boston. And there's a guy there who works there, and he's like, do you need some help? I'm like, why do I look lost? Because I feel lost. And I'm like, I just need to know where to buy a ticket for the train. And he's like, you just got off the train. And I'm like, yeah, but I need a ticket so that I can get on the train. And he's like, you already passed the tickets. And I'm like, I'm confused. I don't know what you're saying. And he's like, you came from the airport? And I'm like, yes. And he goes, well, you get a free ride on the train then, so you can go anywhere that you want in the city. Like, you're past the tickets here, so it's free, basically. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's nice. I'm like, okay, well, I feel really stupid because, like, I didn't know that, but that's super nice then. then I see all these people running and I'm like, why are they running? Like, what's happening? And then I realize that's just part of riding the train. Like, when the train is coming in, if you don't run to catch it, you have to wait 15, 20 minutes for the next one. So yeah, you run to the train when it's coming in. But that's part of, like, I think we started talking about the need-to loop, right? The overthinking between your head and your heart. It's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like I should do this, but logically that's not the right decision. So that's how you get stuck in that. And like I said, the only way to get out of it is to make a decision. The downside of introverted thinking is that it causes us to doubt our intuitions and our feelings, which is that loop that we were talking about, right? And it causes us to look for logical reason for the feelings that we have, or solid proof so that we can trust them. But as we start to get older and we start to trust our intuition more, then we realize you don't really need solid proof. You will get it eventually. A lot of the feelings that I get, especially about people, I've gotten proof for. You don't always get proof right away. And sometimes there have been people in the past that I've worked with, and like as soon as I met them, I was like, ooh, there's just something about you I don't like, you know? And I've learned that you don't really tell other people that, because they call you judgmental and they say, you know, why do you have to act like that? Like, why do you have to judge people? Don't judge a book by its cover and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, you don't get it. It's something different. But then later on, something will happen and you'll realize why it is that you felt that way. Yeah, it can be a whole thing, but you realize as you get older to kind of keep that stuff to yourself and then let everybody else. It's like we want to tell people because we want to warn them, you know, like, hey, this person, you know, there's something off there, you know, but more times than not, it just doesn't work out. You just kind of have to let people learn things by themselves, I guess. Okay, so the last function that we have is called Extroverted Sensing. This function is often unconscious or repressed for us. It takes work and development in order to use it effectively. Extroverted sensing is the ability to be present, to notice things around you and pay attention to the details. We usually have great difficulty being present. One of my favorite things to do is to think about the future. I love to dream about the future. I love to go on like long road trips. And I grew up in the Midwest, and there really isn't a lot of anything in the Midwest. So anytime that we went on road trips when I was little, you spend hours and hours driving through wheat fields and corn fields, and now there's lots of fields that just have like wind generators. So there really isn't a lot to look at or see, but it's a great time to just not be present because, you know, there's nothing going on in the present, especially if you're not driving. It's a great time to just let your mind wander and think about whatever it is that you're planning in your head or what you're dreaming about. It takes work for us to be present, though. We're usually very deep in thought, thinking about what, you know, we're planning, what we're processing, that a lot of times things that are in the present, they're not that interesting to us, right? And it can be kind of a dangerous game to be so focused on the future, because we're always focused on what we want to happen later on, right? And a lot of us are very driven to make those dreams a reality. And as soon as you get those dreams, as soon as they come true, you have the thing that you've been thinking about or planning or wanting, then it's like, okay, what's the next thing? Like, I already have 10 things lined up. So now it's time to move on to the next thing. And it's really easy to just move on without any of the appreciation, any of the gratitude, any of the enjoying the moment or enjoying the thing that you worked so hard for. That takes work. Yep, always what's next? What's the next thing? What are we gonna do? Okay, so those are our functions. That is what's in my book. I wrote a little bit more about shadow functions on my blog. So if you go to infjwoman.com, there is a tab up at the top that says blog, and if you hover over it, it'll show you some blog posts. And there's one about functions and then the one about shadow functions. Shadow functions, so there are 8 functions altogether. Is there 8 function or is there 16? I'm going to tell you the wrong thing. Nope, there are 8. There are 8 functions altogether. And the way that you get 16 is that some of them are introverted and some of them are extroverted, right? So shadow functions are the opposite functions of your regular function, right? So if our functions are introverted intuition, extroverted feeling, introverted thinking, extroverted sensing, then our shadow functions are the opposite. So it's extroverted intuition, introverted feeling, extroverted thinking, and introverted sensing. Shadow functions were really, really interesting to dive into. These are usually unconscious, like you don't really access them a lot, usually only when you get really, really angry or when you're going through something really, really big in your life. When I started digging into them, I realized that when I get really angry or when I get really overwhelmed, then I act out like way different from what I usually act. Sometimes I even scare myself. And I realized that those are shadow functions coming out. So if you have any of that going on in your life, you should definitely check out shadow functions. And like I said, it's on my blog, so you can find it there. If you have any questions, I have a couple of minutes. The book, my book, it's called the INFJ User Guide. I know that it's backwards. I'm sorry, that's Instagram for you. But it's called the INFJ User Guide, and you can find it on Amazon. If you have bought my book on Amazon, please go leave me a review there at the bottom. I think it's at the bottom of the page. You can leave a review. I would really, really appreciate it. I think you can leave a review there even if you didn't buy it on Amazon. So that I would really appreciate that. I always end up taking advice to make the decision that felt right to me in the first place. I do that a lot too. Sometimes I ask certain people for advice. Like I asked my parents for advice. This probably sounds really wrong, but I love my parents and we have a pretty good relationship. But I usually do the opposite of what my parents tell me to do. Just because I know that we live differently. We have different standards. We make decisions based on different things. They are very much, they want to do what they've always done. My dad told me in 2017, I was going on the New Kids on the Block cruise and I was flying to New Orleans and he was taking me to the airport. And he was like, I think you're making a mistake going to New Orleans. And I'm like, why? It's fun. Like, it's going to be fun. And he's like, you've never been there before. How do you know it's fun? I'm like, I don't know, just the adventure of never being there before, right? I think that would be fun. He's like, well, you're going on a boat. Like, that could be really dangerous. I'm like, well, true, but going on an airplane could be dangerous and getting in a car could be dangerous. You know, like, they have safety equipment, you know. If something bad happens, at least we were, like, if something really bad happens, at least we were having fun when it happened, right? And he's like, well, you're going to Mexico too. You're leaving the United States. And I'm like, so? I've done that before. I've been to England. I went to Amsterdam. You know, like, you don't ever want to leave the United States? And he's like, no, I don't want to go anywhere that I haven't been before. And I was like, why? How boring is that? And he's like, well, you know, it's stressful. You don't know where anything is, and you don't know what's good, and, you know, it's just a lot of stress. And I'm like, I mean, it is kind of stressful, but I see it more as, like, fun. It's an adventure, you know? So, yeah, when I have a big decision to make, sometimes I ask my parents for advice just so I know what not to do. Dangerous is where we thrive. That's right. That's right. If it's not at least a little bit dangerous, then what's the fun? I had so much fun going to, like, New York City. I don't think my parents have ever been to New York City. I don't know that I would go now. Certainly not by myself. But, it's fun doing that kind of stuff. And I've met some really good friends doing that kind of stuff. Had to get myself out of the logic feeling loop by learning, by doing. Really leaning into my intuition. Yeah, that's a great way to get out of the loop, really. I learned just recently the whole make a decision then make it the right decision. It's something that I've been doing for my whole life, but it didn't have a catchy little name. So now that it does, I say it over and over again. I wish I had known all of this when I was young. I do too. I wish that I had known it when I was younger, but I also think that it takes us getting older and having more experience to really understand things. I know that the last few years, I've had a lot of moments of really big understanding, and I've had to call my mom a few times and be like, listen, I know that I told you when I was younger that, you know, you were like really stupid and you didn't know anything. I'm so sorry about that. It turns out you're not stupid. And my mom's always like, oh, good. Well, I'm glad that you called to tell me that. That's so nice. How do you deal with skepticism? My husband is an EP and very skeptical of me. How do you deal when that happens? For me, a lot of it is avoidance, I would say. It's kind of like Fight Club, nobody talks. That may not be the healthiest way of dealing with things, especially if it's your husband. I also have this really bad habit of proving people wrong, especially people in the past. Like, my dream job back in the day, I wanted to work in NASCAR. I wanted to be an engineer for a race team. And I ended up being a PR manager for a marketing company that managed race car drivers and sponsors. And so in that position, I just felt this, this childish need to go back and tell everybody, like, see, you told me I wasn't going to make it. You said it was never going to happen. And I just wanted to, thump them on the head and be like, look at me now. Like, I did the thing that you said that I couldn't do. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that, it's kind of pointless. I use that when people tell me that I'm not going to do something, or that it's impossible, that I can't do something. I use that as fuel to say, hey, yeah, I am going to do it just because you said I'm not. And the skepticism is kind of I usually just end up keeping things more to myself. People will only understand you to their level of understanding. That's what I've learned. So if they're willing and open to understanding, then you could try to explain it to them. You could have conversations about it. But if they're not willing to understand, and if it's above their level of understanding, then there's no explaining it to them. It doesn't matter how much you explain it to them. It doesn't matter how detailed of an explanation it is. It doesn't matter if you're like the greatest teacher in the whole entire world. If they don't want to understand it, they're not going to understand it. Not learning until my mid-40s was very challenging. Only recently learning about the stackings. It's revolutionary. Well, I'm close to 40, actually. So I've known about it for a couple of years. But it is nice to know about it. I've talked to some people who've been like 60 and 70 when they've learned about it. So it's nice to have the information when you're younger. I'm beginning to travel by myself, and I live the best experiences of my life. I love traveling. I'm kind of torn. I like traveling by myself because you can go wherever you want and do whatever you want when you want. But then there's also like, I feel like I want to share it with somebody too. And maybe it's good now that we have social media, we can share it with everybody, with lots of people, without having to have somebody there with us. I think part of that for me too is I grew up with 3 siblings. And so when we would go on vacation, it was always like a whole thing. And it was like you needed a vacation from the vacation. You know, people were like, you would always have to wait for somebody. And one of them was just chronically late all the time. And it turned into more of a hassle than any type of fun. And then there was always a compromise about where you're going to eat and what you're going to do. And nobody in my family liked to go to like museums. So the first trip that I went on by myself, I went to London when I was in England. And I spent 4 days just walking around London. And I spent like half a day in the, I think it's the Elizabeth and Albert Museum, Victoria and Albert Museum. I spent about half a day in there. And then I walked over to the British Museum, and I was super disappointed because the only thing British in the British Museum was a couple of the people who worked there. And I was like, I thought this was like British history, but it's not. It's history of all of the other parts of the world. So what you're saying is that introversion often causes people to trust outside opinions over their own. You said something about doubting one's intuition. I had to pop off and pack on. No, introversion, when you're talking about functions are either introverted or extroverted. And what that means is that we have our dominant function is introverted intuition. So what that means is that our intuition is directed inward. We have extroverted feelings. So what that means is that our feeling function is directed outward. So for our intuition, a lot of that comes through our head. Like we focus on what's going on inside of us more than what's going on outside of us. For feeling, it's opposite. We focus on everybody else's feelings before we think about our own feeling. When you're doubting your intuition, that's the ni-ti loop that people are talking about, which is the introverted intuition, introverted thinking loop. So that's basically your head and your heart fighting. Those are the two things. Like your intuition is telling you, you need to do this. And then your thinking function is saying that doesn't make logical sense. And so then, you doubt your intuition because it's not logical. That's what that was about. I hate saying I told you so to people who I think should be paying attention. I do too. A lot of times they just don't pay attention though, is the thing. Which I think it paused for a second because my phone's about to die. A lot of times they just don't pay attention. I actually found out that I was an INFJ in my 20s, now 36, but took the test with a person that was, looking back for sure, was a narcissist. So they didn't give me a lot of good feedback. I know that I've been around a lot of narcissists in my life. All right. Well, I have to go because I'm going to get ready for the workshop that I'm doing. If you haven't signed up for the workshop, make sure that you do. It's completely free. It's called I'm an INFJ, What Now? You can find the link for it in my bio. And thank you guys so much for hanging out and for all of your questions and comments. I really appreciate you. And I will see you again here next week. 7 o'clock Eastern time, same place. Hope you guys have a good weekend. And if you're in the United States, happy, is it Labor Day? It's Labor Day, right? 3-day weekend. That's what I know. So, all right, I'll see you guys again soon. So you just watched that video, and I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you want some more amazing information about INFJs, check out these videos right now. I'll see you there.